The Mystery of Belacena Vilcat. Fourth Book. Quest for Uncle Kurt. Chapter 42. I crossed the main avenue of the Tiergarten, lying on a meteorite that ran at more than 100 kilometers per hour, eluding with instantaneous reflect thousands of potholes of what seemed a moonscape. The German batteries, alerted by Otto Meyer, opened the fire simulating to hit me, something that disconcerted the Russians, and took them to concentrate the fire against them, permitting me to move away. 10 minutes later, I was entering to the Ilfstadt, and I circulated at regular speed through the Rugerstrasse. I stopped in front of 239, I took off my goggles, and I observed both sides of the street. Not a soul. But the most curious was that, contrary to the rest of the blocks that had suffered the demolisher attack of the bombers, the one that contained the house of Konrad Tarstein was intact, as if the war would have not passed there. Once again, as 1,000 times repeated right, I knocked the moldy shackle that turned in the bronze fist. Yes. I heard startling voice of Tarstein through some aperture of the old door. I am Kurt von Subeman. It means, Loops, I am Loops, comrade Unicornish. The door was opened and Tarstein, with extreme serenity, repeated once again. Come in, I was waiting for you. Are the 16 hours, just in time for a cup of tea? It doesn't affect you to forward 1 hour in the English Harry? He inquired with irony. No. A tea will be okay. You don't know what I have to pass to arrive here. Literally, I crossed a column of heavy ammunition. In those instants I didn't know if I was going to arrive here, neither what I was going to find here. You will imagine my surprise at verifying that you have not moved aside from your habitual customs. My estimated Loops, it is not good for the health that an old man like me be changing at this point his mode of life, he explained with renewed irony. Come, let's go to the kitchen and take that tea, and forget for a long time what happens outside. Leave everything on that couch, except the saddleback that contains the stone of Fishkarn. Because, you have came for that, don't you? You have risked your life 1 in 1,000 times to comply with the Black Order. You're admirable Kurt von Subeman, a knight worthy of the Führer, an initiate worthy of the gods. As many times, I entered in the modern kitchen, and seated before a small table covered with fine tablecloth of white linen. Tarstein prepared the infusion in a teapot of porcelain of Shanghai, and filled it with tea of the same provenance. While I savored it, more tranquil, I observed Tarstein examining the stone of Fishkarn. He seemed shocked, something unusual on him. Finally he asked, "Do you know what is this?" The proof that the humanity has a chance, the concrete testimony that the gods of the spirit came to treat with the great initiates that were trying to make real the universal empire. If they would have triumphed in the 13th century, the history of the humanity would be very different, and the enemy would have not had the chance to construct the universal synarchy in the 14th century. For example, it would have not been necessary that Philip the Fair dissolve the Templars between 1307 and 1314, because Frederick II would have had to liquidate them, willingly, in 1227. And you know why that did not happen? Because, this stone that you have brought was lost during 7 crucial years, from 1221 to 1228. In reality, it was not lost but it was concealed, by design of the imperial plans. Alas, Loops, if this stone would have arrived at time to the hands of the Emperor Frederick II, perhaps my own family, the House of Tharsis, would have not been exterminated in 1268. I, naturally, understood very little of this. Just now, after reading the letter of Belacena Vilcat, the words of Tarstein acquire its real and dramatic meaning. In that moment, Konrad Tarstein had noticed the bewilderment in my face, because he procured to clarify with other words the sense of that incredible relic. Do you remember the history of the Emperor Frederick II Ohlensdorfen? He asked energetically. Yes. It means, I remember some relevant facts. I replied hesitating. Well, this fact is very relevant. Do you remember what happened with his crusader vow? Oh, yes. I affirmed, pleased for not being totally ignoring. I think that Frederick II was crowned in Aachen in 1214, and there, he made the fatal vow to Innocent III, to undertake a crusade to Holy Land. By diverse motives, he didn't comply with this promise until 1228, what costed him innumerable complications with the popes, which resulted in excommunications and wars. The dates are correct, Loops. What you don't know with exactitude, because it has remained in secrecy until now, and was just the dominion of some secret societies, is the real motive for which Frederick II delayed his journey to Palestine. And that motive is this: the Stone of Fishken. Frederick II was waiting since 1221, the arrival of a Mongol initiate, that would be carrier of a written pact between the Emperor of East and the Emperor of the West. Such initiate never arrived to Sicily, and the reason was that he was murdered in the Frank Syria, by order of the Catholic Druids. When Frederick II finally decided to travel to Middle East, he did it with the purpose to rescue the Stone of Fishken, which in power of the Lord of Beirut. But it was too late to consummate the metaphysical pact, to submit the order of the world to the Universal Empire. Fishken had died in 1227, and his successors, which were not initiates, fell rapidly in the hands of the priest of the Wide Fraternity. It is worthy to know history with all its details, because now, 700 years later, the possibility to raise the Universal Empire is present again. And, as then, the real struggle is settled in the level of the great initiates, and the high doctrines. The Universal Empire, against the Universal Synarchy. The Hyperborean wisdom, against the Judaic culture. The pact of the Führer with the loyal gods of Agartha, against the pact of the fistful of men, Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin, de Gaulle, etc. With the traitor gods of Chang Shambhala. The enormous massacres of the combatant masses impressed, but they lack of importance, always lack of importance, in front of the confrontation of the initiates and gods. This stone, that you have found in the castle of Frederick II, was the pact between the emperors, with the gods of Agartha, that was going to enable the realization of the Universal Empire, in the 12th century. Frederick II ordered to be concealed by Hyperborean initiates, experts in the lithic construction, with the motto that it be only found by the future Universal Emperor. This stone, as you will comprehend, belongs to the Führer. Then, I had to give it to him in person. When I passed through the bunker, some hours ago, I reflected foolishly. No, Loops. This stone will be given to the Führer in the Antarctic oasis, where he is now. It is possible that the Führer of the bunker is dead at this point. I don't understand, I confessed, even knowing that my words would irritate Konrad Tarstein. Well, you should comprehend. He claimed with foreseeable anger, finally, you're at look too. That less, my estimated Loops, possess many bodies. And, no one knows how many nor where. As they said him correctly in the Tibet, in the Third Reich, has occurred the strange phenomenon that exist many incarnated gods, many Glass, Kurt von Suberman. The Führer is at the look, and it is not strange that he dies in Berlin, and, simultaneously, lives in the Antarctica. That Führer, powerful and strong, as he was at the 25 or 30 years old, we will give him the stone of the pact of blood with Agartha. He was stronger than me and I had to inquire. But, was the Führer conscious that he possessed that extraordinary capacity? You, Shivachuk. Do you know what are happening? Your others, necessary, existences? Certainly not. Well, there is the answer that you search. If you so early are incapable to respond, how do you want me to know the process of it? Look. However, I will give you an idea, he conceded. Thus, is how I imagine the process of the glass. An especial case of metamorphosis. let's establish a relation of analogy between the glass and the Lepidopter and insects, and let's suppose that all the life of it look exemplar, just as the Führer, or Rudolf Hess, is analogous to the Lepidopter and butterfly. Let's guess also that exist a set of twin larvae that, by a particular law of the glass, remain in a state of latent life, while the butterfly develops its active life. And, at last, let's guess that the special laws of the glass determine that when a butterfly dies, automatically, one of those larvae retakes the process of metamorphosis, and becomes a chrysalis, generating a new active life and a new reality. Of course, because the larval life is latent life, and the active life of the butterflies and the glass is real life, the reality of the life that corresponds then to the butterfly's glass, the larvae's glass life, in a same plane of non-real existence, but possible. Such existence is not of the same grade of those that the butterfly's glass demonstrate. Only if a butterfly look dies, or if a law of the glass that demands the existence of two or more butterflies glass acts, a larvae, the look, will transform in real. But, my estimated loops, who knows the laws of the glass? Who knows how many look men can exist in larval state? A common man can take just one decision to realize in a determined space and time. If the alternatives are two must be said without doubts, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. That the look, on the contrary, can opt to realize both possibilities, even if he needs, for that, logically, two simultaneous realities. That the look can, for example, say I am going to stay in Berlin, and I'm going to die there, if the Third Reich loses the war, and also say, I'm going to retire myself to the Antarctic oasis, with the SS elite, to prepare the final battle against the universal synarchy, and comply both statements. For a common person, it would be impossible to realize both sentences, but, for a Fretl, that is perfectly possible. Naturally, loops, that the two or three realities of that look will only coincide in the own look, in the context that confers him meaning, and that he means. Out of that look, the realities of the living glass may not coincide, the time contract or expand, dislocate, contradict history. What is in the reality of a living look, it means, of a real look, exemplar, of a butterfly look, beyond of the look, may not be in the reality of another real look, but different from the first. Or, inversely, it can be amply on its context. I clarify you this to warn you that, from now on, the followers of the Hyperborean wisdom must define to what reality they refer. If to the reality of the dead Führer in the Chancellery bunker of Berlin, or the reality of the living Führer, always young in his magical refugee, where he awaits the historical times of the final battle. And, I anticipate you that, those, who chose to live in the first reality, will be considered traitors, no matter how National Socialist, or Nazis, they proclaim to be. With brilliant eyes, Konrad Tarstein stopped for a second to serve more tea. Rudolf Hess? Yes, Rudolf Hess is also at the look, and for this reason now he is with the Führer, in the secret refugee. Just as you know him, he has not changed at all. And because he is at the look, he can be with the Führer, and, also, be prisoner of the English. But let's forget that less for the moment, and retake the stone of Fishken. I said you before that, it's worthy to know the history with all its details. You have found it, and you deserve better than anyone to know that history, although, this is not the best occasion to relate it. Anyways, I will resume it to you. Pay attention. In Mongolia, in the Gobi Desert, there's a place that the Hyperborean wisdom denominates the Dortar, which communicates directly with the kingdom of Agartha. In the age of Fishkan and Frederick II, the loyal cities had approved a plan of the Hyperborean initiates, known as Strategy Tia, destined to found the universal empire on the earth. The chosen one, for that in Orient was the Prince Temujin, who received the jewel of the Hyperborean initiation by some siddhas coming from the Dortar. Remember that, the father of Temujin, Yasuke, had died poisoned by the Tatars when the young prince was only 9 years old, and that, since then until his adulthood, he lived miserably with his mother and brothers, in the deserted lands of the Haiwan known as all the great chosen ones of the history. Is during that period that the sitters instruct and initiate him. According to the local tradition, the great ancestors of the Mongols were the Grey Wolf and the Tawny Roe, what means that his ancestors were not human, or what is the same, they were gods. In the sacred cavern of Ken, the Grey Wolf married with the Tawny Roe, who proceeded from the environs of the Lake Ball. Then, the original couple moved to the sacred mountain Bergane Kuldun, the actual Kenti, ancient abode of Kokkef, god of the infinite. If their great ancestors were gods, their closer relatives had not been less powerful. His grandfather was Kublai, the first organizer of the Mongolian tribes and military conqueror, and his father, Yerde, have taken a sobriquet of Barator, it means, the brave. His mother Relin brought him to the world in the year of the pit of 1167, that is, 27 more than Frederick II, born in 1194. His purity of blood was so elevated that he became worthy to a representation of the sign of the origin, the highest Hyperborean distinction of the 13th century after the Grail, which was entrusted to the Exitan Cathars. For this reason, when a diet of Mongol chiefs and kings gathered in 1206 in Karakoram and elected him Khan, Temujin exhibited with pride the sign that had given him the triumph over his enemies, and permitted him to fulfill the unity of his race. That sign, which he held in his ring and pennant, was the leftward swastika, the same that 700 years later would be displayed in the glorious suites by another Hyperborean people, but this time of white race. Tunfish Khan was entrusted a historical mission that he knew to fulfill in all its aspects, so it is not possible to reproach him anything for the failure of the strategy tier. On the contrary, this failure is because of almost exclusively to the excellent counter-offensive unleashed in Occident by the enemy forces, which operated infiltrated in the Catholic Church. That historical mission consisted in to found a great Mongol kingdom in the east, that included the north and center of Asia completely, simultaneously, with the rise of a great white kingdom in the west. When the foundation of these kingdoms be consummated, then would reach the moment to seal with a pact the creation of the universal empire, in which the Mongols would be subordinated to an authentic king of the white world, and where the yellow masses would reserve the right to advance towards the west, and the white elites, less numerous, but more culturally capacitated, would march towards the east. There, in Mongolia, the crown of the earth would flourish a Hyperborean civilization, never seen before since the days of the Atlantis. These were, in few words, the proposed objectives of the strategy tier. I'll show you now, loops, how Tunfish Khan complies with his part in the strategy tier. In 1206, gathers all the Mongol tribes, and initiates the conquest of Chineland. In 1215, with the take of Pekin, reaches the oriental limit of Asia. Thenceforth, it only misses to make contact with the king of the west. But who is this king? How recognize him if, towards the west, far of the unity is worn a confused feudal organization? I remember, loops, that according to the Hyperborean wisdom, the effects of the Kali-Yuga are not of the same intensity in all the geographic points. On the contrary, there is a root of the Kali-Yuga that runs in spiral the spherical surface of the earth, and over which the Kali-Yuga is more intense, or more actual. Such zone is swiveling, and, in the region that we are considering, swiveling from east to west, it means that the effects of the Kali-Yuga are more intense towards the west than to the east. To the east, increases the spirituality, and to west, increases the materialism of the Kali-Yuga. Attending to these principles, is that the door of Tar, in the Gobi Desert, is also denominated center of minor intensity of the Kali-Yuga. To be situated in the dilemma of Tunfish Khan, it must be considered that the king of the west should be great, for the power of the Spirit, as was also Temujin, and reflect about the difficulties that imply to look from the east of Asia, to the west of Occident. Fish Khan, towards the west, only saw spiritual darkness, and kingdoms, many kingdoms, but none great kingdom, the kingdom of the Persians, which would fall soon, the kingdom of the Byzantines Greeks, which barely resisted the Arab and Turk siege. A very little and weak kingdom, with kings without initiative, who were pleased to call themselves emperors. The Slavic kingdoms of Russians and Polish, could not even dream to put at the head of the populations of the West, and, on the contrary, they would be easy prey of the Golden Horde. By identical motive, it must be noted Armenia, Georgia, Bulgaria, Hungary, etc. The Germanic kingdoms of Europe remained, undoubtedly, the strongest, but, in them, according to the vision of Fish Khan, the shadows were absolute. If there was the great king, it would be precise to distinguish him for his external qualities, and for it, he should count with the adequate information. With this purpose, he guided to his presence to many travelers, merchants or religious, who were harshly interrogated, with few results. But, from their narrations he could know that really existed two great Christian kingdoms, one Frank, and another Roman German. The Frank kingdom was precisely the one that, since a century ago, carried out that absurd war against the Arabs, during which they had occupied Syria and Palestine. Fish Khan, then, thought that he should talk with the Frank king, and the German king, but just one more doubt remained to clarify. Both kings called themselves Christians, and servants of a great priest called Pope. Could this Pope be the real king of the world? To make an opinion about the Christianity, and the sent to search for the Nestorian priests of Armenia, and some Orthodox Greeks which were as slaves in Pekin. By them, he knew the history of Jesus Christ, and knew that the Pope was not a warrior, but a sheepherder, that not killed, but sent to kill, and that he not ride with his people during the wars, but he remained all his life, in secure and far convents. And as a grin of displeasure, Fish Khan dismissed the Pope, as a worthy spiritual authority to treat with. Before 1220, Fish Khan already knew that from the two kings, the Frank, and the German, was convenient for his plans to talk with some of them. He obtained such conviction at evaluating the religious information that one of his multiple esoteric confidants gave him. But, it is worthy to make an clarification here. While Fish Khan was alive, three were the religions that surrounded him, and to which he gave special attention: the Nestorian Christianism, the Persian Manichaeism, and fundamentally, the Taoism. The Manichaeism, which has managed to expand to China, in the 13th century, was respected from Fish Khan, but not by his successors, who fought so fiercely to make it disappear, just as the Taoism was then chased. He rejected the religion of Confucius, for reactionary, and in the Buddhism, he recognized immediately a system based in the Kalachakra of Chang Shambhala, against which his Hyperborean instructors warned him early. Was a Manichaean priest, who informed him one day that, beyond the kingdom of the Franks, in feuds of the king Aragon, who is vassal of the German king, there is a powerful Manichaean community to whom the angels have given in custody a glass of stone, which is not from this world. This new, impressed Fish Khan, as the knowledge that the troops of the king of the Franks, with the blessing of the Pope, were dedicated to exterminate those Manichaeans of the West called Cathars, that's to say, pure. An entire Manichaean route permitted that such novelties arrived to Asia. From Languedoc to Italy, to the Cathar and Bogomil communities of Milan, from Terek to Bulgaria, center of the Bogomil Manichaeism, and, of the Balkans, Bogomil and Paulican missionaries carried the news to Armenia and Iran. The Cathars sustained that the material world had been created by Jehovah Satan, with the help of a court of demons. They believed in a real God, who was unknowable from the state of spiritual impurity that the incarnation meant. They also believed in the Christ of light, to whom they called Lucibel, and in the Parakleto, or Holy Spirit, an agent completely transcendent to the material sphere. Consequently, with these beliefs they refused the Old Testament of the Bible, for considering that there was narrated the story of the creation of the world by Jehovah, Satan, a malignant creator, and in which the real God was not mentioned. The New Testament only was accepted the Gospel of Juan, and the Apocalypses. They opined that the Roman Church was the synagogue of Satan, a refugee for the demons, and his servants in which not a single ray of spiritual light shone. Naturally, if the believers in a so clear doctrine were condemned to death by the Pope, and repressed until the annihilation by the troops of the Frank King, there were no doubts that these last were, at the same time, followers of the demiurge Jehovah Satan. But things were not so clear from Mongolia. Indeed, it resulted suspicious that the Frank King Philip August not participated from the Cathar slaughter, and, what was more striking, that the entire France would have been questioned between 1200 and 1213 by Innocent III, due to the concubinage that the king maintained with a mistress. Which of the kings, the German or the Frank, was, at last, the ally that the Siddhas mentioned? Seeing the West obscured by the darkness of the Kali-Yuga, Fish Khan decided to send 3 ambassador messengers to Innocent III, to Philip August, and Frederick II, with the mission to initiate diplomatic relations, and who were instructed to realize discreet quests destined to fulfill an alliance between the East and the West. He did it to gain time, while other envoys traveled to the center of minor intensity, to search for the answers. By 1220, Fish Khan already knew that the pact should be celebrated with the German kingdom. But such pact would not be political, but spiritual, and would be celebrated in many worlds at the same time. It required greater certainties than the mere human conviction. In 1221, the wise Taoist Kiryachachi returned, after 2 years, from the expedition of the center of minor intensity. In the Mongol campsite, at the shores of the Golden River, the wise narrated to Fish Khan his incredible adventure. He had been authorized by the Siddhas to visit the kingdom of Agartha. Guided by some mysterious Mongol initiates, they interned themselves hundreds of kilometers in the Gobi Desert, up to a zone completely isolated and wasted where it seemed impossible the existence any vestige of vegetal or animal life. In such site, apparently in the midst of the desert, the monks decided to camp, and, even if it seemed a suicide, the Chinese wise man didn't dare to contradict them. They stayed many days there. He lost the count of the total, until one night, in which he was deeply asleep, trying to recover the forces that during the day the burning sun snatched him without mercy, he was abruptly awakened. Without going out from the astonishment, he was invited by the monks, who were accompanied by some terrible warriors of unknown provenance, to join them in that desert towards a determined direction. But they didn't perambulate too much, due to, very near from the campsite, in a place that on those days had observed many times, and in which there could be nothing else than sand, was clearly distinguished a whitish light that sprouted from the ground. Was a clear night, with a moon that spilled torrents of silver light over the sinuous surface of the desert. However, and the wise man of Shantung repeated this many times, at a few steps of distance, the light that sprouted from the ground was 100 times more intense than the moon, to the point that its blinding blaze avoided to distinguish what, or whom produced it. Hesitating, he stopped in front of the light, and just seconds later, when his eyes were accustomed, he could verify that a perfect rectangular contour was cut against the floor, where a heavy faience of stone had been moved. The light came from such aperture that guided directly to a descending stair, which echelons were lost rapidly from the sight in the depths of the earth. Notwithstanding it, Fish Khan accepted the fantastic history of him, because the wise man Kiryachachi deserved his total trust, and, mainly, because his mission had been successful. He brought with him a message of the Siddhas, and a doula of Agartha accompanied him to interpret such a message before the Khan of the Mongols. According to Kiryachachi, after descending to the incredible depths, by such trap of the desert, they arrived to a horizontal tunnel perfectly illuminated, and, there, they took a train that traveled swiftly, without wheels neither horses, which guided them, in few minutes to the city of Wetan, the Lord of the War, where, even though, being underground, it is possible to see the sky, and the stars. In Agartha, the Lord of the War in person, received Kiryachachi, to whom, he said, I was waiting to give you, the magical formula, that gives power, over the peoples. Such formula, explained Wotang, was already known by Fish Khan, since the days of his Hyperborean initiation. The newness consisted now, in that the formula, had been gifted with a new light, more intense, with the finality, that it could be read even in middle of the more impenetrable darkness. In sum, Wotang gave to Kiryachachi a green stone, similar to the jade, in which were carved 2 parallel columns of 13 signs, due to, explained Wotang, as the Vigor language that Ng Khan spoke, as the idiom of the great king of West, to whom the stone was destined, came from an ancient sacred language called H. It means, Eta. The stone consisted in the unique Pakshavaborum, that is to say, an agreed formula, because, just by its lecture by each king, the Mongol, and the one of the West, of the written formula, the metaphysical pact, which not included the body, or the material goods, but the spirit of the peoples, and that compromised in the strife to the Lord of the War, and his army of angels, would remain sealed. Such pact was with security 1,000 times more powerful, and abiding, than the weak and doubtful alliances of the men. To custody the stone, and assure that the formula would be pronounced with the adequate ritual, one of the strange dweller of Agartha, of Mongol features, but of red skin, would accompany Kiryachachi to the campsite of Fish Khan. In 1221, when Fish Khan pronounced the 13 words in a precise order and moment, his part of the Tia strategy was definitely completed. Since then, all would depend from the white races of the West. If they were enough pure, they would not doubt to follow a universal emperor of their lineage, once he would have pronounced the 13 words, which were also 13 runes. Since 1 year ago, in the age in which Kiryachachi returned from Gobi Desert, some messengers of the Khan had gone towards the far Sicily to advance the German emperor, the future arrival of an initiate, who would carry a message from another world. And during the next years, between 1222 and 1228, such envoy would be vainly awaited in Occident, what delayed in more than one opportunity, the crusade that the German emperor had to undertake to Holy Land, and that motivated at last his excommunication. What had happened with the messenger and the stone? For 4 years, Frederick II awaited vainly his arrival, but the Tetris had been swallowed by the ground. The excellent Beber's clairvoyance, that the emperor maintained in his court of Palermo, announced him many times that the envoy Khan had been stopped in Holy Land, but Frederick II refused to give credit to such auguries, attributing them, rather to antipathy, that the Franks awakened in the Saracens. However, he took advantage of his recent widowhood, and in 1225, he married with Isabel of Brienne, the daughter of one of Brienne, Frank King of Jerusalem. Isabel contributed as dowry the kingdom of Jerusalem, but Frederick II was not so interested in that crown as to know where was the stone of Fish Khan. He knew it, thanks to his wife. His uncles, Juan and Felipe of Ibelin, encouraged by the papal legacy, had seized from the messenger and his message. But it was too late for the Tia strategy. Frederick II knew the truth just in 1227, the year of Fish Khan's demise, and, after threatening to Isabel, repudiate her. Disposed to find the stone, he left the Holy Land, not without being excommunicated by the Pope Gregory IX. In that same year, the unfortunate Queen Isabel died giving birth, delivering the future King Conrad IV, then father of the Reg Conrading. Informed that one of Ibelin was in Cyprus, he took this island by assault with 800 Teutonic knights, and he seized from his sons, Balan and Baldino of Ibelin. Once in the campsite of the Emperor Topali, Frederick II requested him the devolution of the stone, and of the messenger of Fish Khan, to what one of Berlin replied that the Mongol had died many years ago, and that he had the stone in his castle of Beirut, in the Frank Palestine. In front of this, Frederick put the young princes in the rack of the torments, and threatened with the torture, if the stone was not restored to him in a minimum time, to what the Lord of Beirut acceded without conditions. When he obtained the stone, he knew the root of the plot. This had its origin in the Order of the Temple. The Great Master had assured to the Pope, and many pious Frank knights, that Frederick II was planning an alliance with the Mongols to submit the world under his will. The next step would be the destruction of the Catholic Church. That information, even if it was not completely false, was malicious, and ill-disposed, and achieved the searched effect, to avoid that the mentioned pact be fulfilled. But the plot had been developed 6 years before, and it had not arrangement anymore, after Fish Khan's death. Thus, once defeated in what constituted the spiritual objective of his life, Frederick II disembarked in Holy Land, disposed to take vengeance in what was possible for him. Paradoxically, such emperor of the Christian kings was facing a general revolt of the Frank lords, fostered by the Templar and Hospital orders, and in turn he enjoyed of the high esteem of the Arabs. For years, indeed, Frederick II maintained correspondence with the Sultan of Egypt, Mulai al-Kamil, who considered him the greatest prince of Christianity, and a saint. In that opportunity, he didn't hesitate to give him the 3 holy lands, Jerusalem, Belen, and Nazareth, which were in his power. In 1229, was signed the Treaty of Jaffa, that confirmed such cession, as long as the custody be in charge of the Teutonic Knights. But Frederick II was not satisfied humiliating in this mode the Franks. He wanted that the entire Sicily be in power of the Teutonics, and he employed every resource that he had at hand to achieve it, within them the promise realized with the sultans, to share with the Mohammedans the holy places. In fact, he permitted that in Jerusalem the mosques remain opened, as well for the rest cities that he recovered. In Jerusalem, he started the most irritating event at taking the crown of the king, which was over the holy sepulchre, and crowned by himself, putting it upon his head before the presence of the Great Master, and the Teutonic Order, Hermann von Salza, and hundreds of German and Sicilian knights. Not satisfied with this, he went to San Juan of Acre, bastion of the Templars, and occupied it, with his troops. In the palace of the king, which he seized for being sovereign of Jerusalem, he did a great, and he invited numerous chiefs of the Saracen army, during which he exhibited tens of Christian prostitutes, rescued from the brothels of the Templars. This initiative unveiled the hypocrisy of the Frank knights, who, on one side proclaimed the chastity, and they even practiced the sodomy, and on the other, they exposed those baptized women to every kind of temptations and sins. So crude reality impressed even to the not very virtuous Saracens, and the prestige of the Templars fell lower than ever. Of course, with such denounces, the emperor was searching that the Templars lose their patience, and offer an excuse to battle with them, a war. And his tactic resulted, because they tried to kill him, and he responded attacking the house of the temple, and the castle Châteaupurin. And, if not everyone, was exterminated by the wraths of Frederick II, who, expectedly would not delay to call the Arabs in his help, was because he received a stab in the back, at knowing that his father-in-law one of Brian was invading Sicily by the command of the Pope Gregory IX, and that his son, Henry II, King of Germany, was betraying him, supporting the Guelphs. That bad news forced him to come back to Sicily where, with very superior troops, he defeated the Pope, and obeyed him, to lift the excommunication, marching then to Germany, where he deposed Henry, and replaced him, by the little boy Conrad IV. On the next years, he constructed the castle of the King of the World, by the Hyperborean initiates, and buried the stone, that you have localized now, Loops. but have present that Frederick II was also up to look, something that everyone accepted in his time, because the people never surrendered at his death, and awaited his return, for centuries. And where did the Kybulingers believe that the emperor had traveled? Well, nothing less than the kingdom of Prestwan, that is to say, the kingdom of Fish Khan, the great emperor of Keter, Katawa, or Agartha, the mythical kingdom of Katagara, which was situated in China. In the age of Frederick II, the great Khan was also that great dog, that's to say, the lord of the dog, the guardian of heaven, the king of the universal empire of the East, just as I mentioned many years ago, with the motive of the flight of Rudolf Hess to England. When Frederick II left, after 1250, and especially during the interregnum, hundreds of troubadours and minstrels sang couplets in which was narrated the journey of the empire to the kingdom of Prestwan, and tears and laments poured because both kings didn't encounter each other at last, fact that would bring consequently the new order of the universal empire. Nevertheless, on the Trouvers was assured that, someday, Frederick II, holding his stone of Venus, Lapis Exilis, would reunite with Fish Khan, to found the universal empire. To end, I want to remind you that, the said alliance, between the Roman-German Empire, and the Mongol Empire, was an open secret in the 13th century, although, later the Sinaitic obscurantism, occulted the truth of the facts. But, it is enough to refer to the proofs to know the truth. Once Fish Khan's demise was known in Occident, and the position of his successor, Godi, it was not thought in anything else than to gestate another alliance, favorable for the Sinaitic plans, this time. Behind this was, of course, the White Fraternity. In 1245, the Pope Innocent IV, who had taken shelter in Lyon, the city of the Druids, fleeing from Frederick II, proclaimed a general council in order to excommunicate and despoil him of the imperial investiture. It was the famous Council of Lyon, a sort of Congress of Basel, of the period, that's to say, similar to one that the rabbis sustained in 1897, and that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, in which was discussed the faster way to end with the House of Swabia, and implant the universal synarchy. Well, no one associate the fact that in such council, convened exclusively to treat the matter of Frederick II, the Pope Innocent IV, proposed to send an embassy to the Mongol Emperor. Of the Council of Lyon would emanate the directives followed by the Franciscan monk, Jean of Plankarping, and the friars Benedict of Poland, and Stephen of Hungary, who, in 1246, would arrive to Mongolia, after crossing Russia. If the Sinai counter-alliance was not fulfilled then, was because Godi had died, and Gyuk, his successor, did not convince the letter of the Pope at all, which his grandfather, Fish Khan, advised it. Later, the Holy See would send to the Friar Eslin, with identical mission to convince the Mongols about the goodness of the Synarchy, and the own Saint Louis would send knights to Mongolia, but only to request help against the Arabs. They were representatives of Saint Louis, amongst others, Andrei Revlin-Jmu, and the Friar Guillaume of Rubrogue. They left in 1253, and arrived to Karakorum, by the route of the Black Sea, but they also failed, because in that moment, Menka Khan was reigning, about whom Sialtake, great-grandson of Fish Khan, and Nestorian Christian, had advised against the Pope of Rome. The Pope Nicholas V, pressed by the order of preachers, sends the Dominican Recold of Monte Croix to Baghdad, who establishes a fructiferous treaty with the Mongols, and achieved to found a monastery in Bar. As a result of this embassy, emerges the journey of the Turkish bishop, Rabban Koma, to Paris, in representation of the Mongol king of Persia, Egon. The grandson of Saint Louis was reigning then, in France, Philip the Fair, strong Ghibelline, and supporter of the universal empire, and for this reason the alliance has possibilities to flourish this time. Nevertheless, even though he maintained a permanent diplomatic connection with Mongolia, Philip the Fair didn't obtain to fulfill the project, due to the fall of Acre in 1291, in hands of the Mamluks of the Sultan Al-Akraf, who would bring the Templars to Europe. Philip the Fair wanted to be universal emperor as Frederick II of Swabia, but this would possible only if he ended before with the power of the Templars and the popes. The terrible clashes that he sustained with Boniface VIII, and the extremely complex task to dismantle the infrastructure of the Order of the Temple, would maintain him occupied until his death. Perhaps, the historical opportunity of Frederick II was still present in the times of Philip the Fair, but this lacked of material time to be consolidated in Europe, and join the spiritual forces of Asia. In some loops, all these prove that a great esoteric movement existed between Europe and Mongolia-China, long before the publicized and feuilleton Pripyat of the Venetian merchants Polo, in the 14th century, which was just a lucrative materialistic adventure, lacking of any transcendental content, and, undoubtedly, for this reason, it is located in first place. It has been attempted, by the habitual obscurantist methods, to ignore what is not desired to accept as real, to deny, or not respond to the disquieting matter of the military might of the Mongols, his superior tactic, at annihilating invariably the medieval formations. It is undeniable, but it has caused a collective trauma in the Europeans. Whence can the superiority of a strategy proceed, but from the spirit, from a lucid intelligence, and an unlimited courage? If the Mongols were the barbarians which it is pretended, they would have never crossed from the Urals. But they will also say that we were barbarians, and that we ate human flesh. Oh, who knows what other barbarities? Don't forget that we have acted in similar way of the Mongols of Fish Khan, and against the same enemy, and wearing the same flag. Even our best tactic, the Blitzkrieg, is inspired in the fast and unerring movement of the Mongol horde. Wait a moment, Loops, I will bring something that I had prepared for you. The masterly class that Tarstein has just dictated made me forget the war, the imminent military defeat of the Third Reich, and even the black reality that I did not know what I would do onwards, if I had to die in the bunker, as the Tibetan Legion decided heroically, or if I would have to flee towards an uncertain destiny in a world without the Third Reich, that is to say, in a synarchic world. I did not even want to consider this last possibility. I sheltered instead the secret hope that the initiates of the Black Order would have decided to take me with them to the Antarctic refugee of the Führer. Didn't I do enough merits to deserve such distinction? Furthermore, there was Rudolf Hess too, my protector. Would he disapprove my presence? I did not comprehend completely the mysterious matter of the Dles, and their faculty to possess many bodies. I already told you, Nif, that I felt a unique individual perception, that didn't change till today, and then, I did not see what problem could be, if another Dluk joined to the Dles, that were preparing themselves to the final battle. Before continuing with the narration of what happened such day, the last one that I state there, in the Gruggestrade 239, I want you to repairing, that the information given by Tarstein, about Frederick II, clarifies a lot the words of Belacena Vilka, written in the 19th day of her letter. It said the causes of Frederick's hostility against the Catholic Church were two: the positive reaction of the heritage of her pure blood, thanks to the historical proximity of the Grail, concept that I'll explain, and the influence of some Hyperborean initiates, that the own Frederick II brought to his court of Palermo from far countries of Asia, and which history I could not stop to relate in this letter. You have brought something very valuable for the Führer, and the SS. Tarstein began saying at his return, while he was giving me a leather case, with silver cap, and lock, and I will reward you, with something incomparably minor, but not less valuable for me. Take, Loops, Kurt, my unpublished book, The Secret History of the Tligizielschaft. On it is narrated the history of the last 630 years, of the German branch of the House of Farsis, and contains the proofs of its outstanding intervention in the foundation of the medieval order Einherjar, which would endure many centuries, and would give place in the 20th century, to the Gesellschaft, and, then to the Black Order SS. I give it to you, because I have consulted with the sitters, and they have told me that you are predestined to know all the secrets of my lineage. Perhaps, it'd be given to you, even what not even we have achieved, this is, to continue the millenary story of the House of Tharsis, and discover the mission that you great ancestors, have entrusted to you. I appreciated that for Tarstein, such revelation was very important, but, I understood also that, he was bidding me farewell subtly, and, that was what I feared. I felt it for the sensibility of Tarstein, but, I had to clarify the things. I took the book ignoring his speech. You speak as if we won't see each other ever again, but at the same time, as if I will survive the enough, as to read this book, I said harshly. Tarstein didn't unnerve, and he decided to respond to my curtness with irony, but with similar rudeness. Very sagacious, Loops. But is that, effectively, we will not see each other in this life again, even if we'll join very soon in the final battle. The destiny of the blessed is so ambiguous. It resulted very difficult to me to communicate you this, believe me, but I am happy that you have came to the point. Now I will tell you, honestly, what is the situation. You are still an SS officer, and you must obey the orders as everyone. And your orders are to flee from Germany immediately, and hide yourself in the Republic of Argentina, where your sister lives. No, I screamed, interrupting the directives. You can't do this to me. I have done all what has been ordered to me, with all the loyalty and courage that I was possible to me, but these orders are excessive. I prefer to die 1,000 times, before to survive in a world dominated by the Jews. It is not lack of courage, it is not disloyalty, it's revulsion, Comrade Tarstein, simple revulsion, and horror, to live in a world without honor, where our flags don't flutter nowhere. Since my childhood in Egypt, when I incorporated myself to the Hitler's youths, I have breathed the mystic of the National Socialism endlessly. Nobody prepared us for this. No, comrade, we were not created to be defeated by the infernal forces, and survive under its empire. Just one moment ago, I sheltered the hope that I would be allowed to be evacuated to the refugee of the Führerlook, as you call it. But now, you'll leave me frozen, with your orders to hide myself in the Argentina. I have been SS officer, I've been initiated, I have developed amazing faculties, but, now, I see that, I have just been an instrument of destiny, a toy of the gods. And do you know why I feel thus? Because, even for all what I've been and done, the truth is that, I don't understand anything, in the same way that, I cannot see the sign that is me, and that you admire so much. And even less this sentence to survive to the destruction of the Third Reich. I beg you, Comrade Tarstein, if it is not possible for me to leave with you beside the Führer, ask me the death, grant me the authorization to die with honor, or kill me. See, Kurt, you get tough, and I will have to interrupt the exposition of your orders to clarify you some points. First, and principle, I already warned you that, from now on, the followers of the Hyperborean wisdom must define to what reality they refer, if to the reality of the Führer dead, or the reality of the Führer alive. And, I anticipate you that those who chose to live in the first reality will be considered traitors by the Black Order. You, my estimated Kurt, at proposing me the case of the survival in a world where the Third Reich has been defeated, you are participating from the first reality. Of course, I will not do a syllogism of this, and conclude that you're a traitor, because I know that you are not. Just that, indeed, you don't understand the situation, accusation that, according to what you have told me, other persons have done to you. Well, I will clarify you the situation in such mode that, you will have no more doubts. You will not stay in the world that you imagine as a condemned, but you will act as a secret agent of the Black Order SS, in a world effectively Judaic. and you will act as representative of the Führer alive, as his fifth column, as a SS initiate, infiltrated in enemy territory, nothing different to the mission that you have realized until now. Believe me, Kurt, Loops, don't believe in the fall of the bunker, and the Führer's suicide. It is the only way that you will be able to comply with your orders. Second, and you must believe me, we would take you to the Führer's refugee, but the Sid has affirmed that you must fulfill this last mission. As I said years ago, you are not only important, you're a support of first grade for the strategy at the Führer. And the strategy can't permit to dispense with you, in the place that you must be, just because you suffer nausea and judeophobia. What we ask you is not impossible for you, and I know that you will comply. They need you here. And the loyal gods are who decide who goes, and who doesn't go, to the Führer's refugee. Such selection escapes completely to the will of the initiates of the Black Order. Third, you have presumed erroneously that I will also leave to the refugee of the Führer, but I must repeat you what I said you at the beginning. We won't see each other in this life again. This doesn't mean that I'm authorized to leave. As you, my orders assure that I must stay in this world, in this house of East Berlin, which will be never found by the Russians, not even if they trap all the houses of the block. However, you mustn't come to see me, neither come to see anyone else of the Waffen-SS, except your endearing comrade Eskard Phil. About Karl von Grossen, I will tell you then, what are the orders? That's all. Have you comprehended, Kurt? If that's affirmative, I'll continue exposing your orders. Let's suppose that the years pass, and nothing happens, and I disobey and decide to come to see you, I interrupted. Don't you understand, Kurt? You will never find this house. Try it. When you leave, move away some steps in any direction, turn around the block, do whatever you want, and then return to the Grugerstrasse, and try to find the 239. You will verify that it doesn't exist. You will find another different house, perhaps Bond. If you were able to arrive here, is because I expected you, but when your presence be not necessary for the strategy, you'll never coincide with me, and this house. Such is the power of the absolute location, that the beings consecrated to the Hyperoborean strategy possess. Only coincide in the space and time, the beings whose coincidence is strategically significant. And that is the reality of the beings that exist. And the other created beings, even though they are related each other in the space and time, if they are not strategically significant, they don't exist for the spirit, they are Maya, illusion. You, as an initiate, should know it. Have you forgotten that this is the war between the spirit and the potencies of the matter? But I didn't attend reasons. Of course, I understood that a Hyperborean Pontiff as Tarstein had the power to situate himself in other dimensions of the illusory reality of Maya, including the house of the Tligesellschaft, and that I would never find him, if he didn't want it to occur. But I insisted one more time. And if I employ the Dox Davis? And if I trace you through the dimensions, and get near to you, even if it is not in the Grugerstrasse 239? Tarstein started to laugh. You're really obstinate, Kurt. If you employ the Dox Davis, you will undoubtedly find me. Likewise, if you make them fly to the Führer's refugee, they will take you there with security. But I do not want to exaggerate how any of us will take a similar attitude by your part. Accept it, once and for all. You're a soldier, and you will continue being it onwards. No one will dismiss you from the SS. And, as a soldier, you must obey orders that I will transmit you now, and that you will comply scrupulously. Orders that if you not fulfill, will be causal of summary, or court of honor. If you appear by my side, or go to the Führer's refugee, you would make yourself liable of summary execution, but, what is worse than the death for an initiate, you would be expelled from the Black Order SS. I know that is hard what I am saying, but you must accept it, and behave as a soldier, as a wise warrior. Before, you complained that the Third Reich didn't instruct you to live under the universal synarchy. It is true. But, if we have clarified you in something, is in the difference between the heart and the egoic mind, that is to say, between the reason of the heart and the reason of the self, between the emotions or feelings of the heart and the pure ideas of the spiritual self. And in the neological ethics of the Hyperborean wisdom, we have demonstrated you the spiritual superiority of the self from above the heart. We have taught you how to dominate the heart with the self. We despoil you from feelings, and we forged in you a new heart of steel. We put you a stone in your heart, Kurt. And, in turn of the reason of the heart, which is weak and lovely, we made you accede to the absolute honor of the spirit, fundament of the camaraderie. I remind you these ethic neological principles, because, and forgive me for the honesty, your attitude result pusillanimous to me, product of a miserable affective connection, of a fear to prescinde from the illusory relations between Hyperborean initiates, of a lack of faith in yourself. The truth, the harsh truth, is that we are not friends, and we will never be. We are comrades, followers of the mystical ideals of Führer's strategy. And, if we are not friends, and the strategic orders demand that we don't see each other again in this life, can you tell me, by which spiritual motive would you want to meet with me, out of the Kairos? I remained in silence. I would not respond to the question without answer, because I remembered my attitude in the Operation First Key. When guided by the doxed Davis, I became a charismatic leader, and guided the comrades to the hell of the Valley of the Immortal Demons. How different moral the one of that moment, and the present. Naturally that then, the war had not begun and the Third Reich seemed military invincible. I fully warned that the difficult to digest, even if I didn't understand and share the strategic motives of the Führer, was the destruction of the Third Reich, and the probable constitution of the Universal Synarchy. It was not that my heart had softened, but that the war, the apparent result of the war, had confused me. And from that confusion was formed the nihilistic attitude that I manifested before the orders of Tarstein. Then, I understood it, the wisdom of Tarstein had made comprehend. For that reason, your question would remain without answer. As I told you, Nif, the reality of Nineveh 45 was very difficult to digest, even though Tarstein advised me to don't believe it. Conrad Tarstein continued with the exposure of the orders. Well, Kurt, I will go on with your orders. The first that you'll do, at leaving from here, will be to come back to Italy, to the monastery of our Franciscan comrades, where von Grossen and Oscar Phil are occulted. The three of you figure in a secret list that an organization of the SS manages known with the key name of the Spider. Such organization has been formed to support the members of the Waffen SS, who are object of the Judaic persecution after the war. You must be prudent at treating with them, because it is an exoterical group that little or nothing know about the Black Order, if they are not second-hand news. For your misfortune, I'll confirm you that the 705 SS initiates of the Black Order and its instructors have been, or will be evacuated from the Occidental civilization, because, even though not all are accepted in the refugee of the Führer, there are other refugees appropriated to await the final battle. The 15,000 children of pure blood, product of the racial experiments of Dyer and Rosenberg, have been transferred to these sites. To you, on the contrary, it is requested to stay in this world, and I do not know another initiate to whom such order has been given, although I don't discard that in the future, initiates will be sent to fulfill special missions. The gods will know why they have determined it thus, and to them you will have to reclaim. But, meanwhile you must be careful, very careful, because, who stays in representation of the SS, will be comrades without esoteric instruction in the Hyperborean wisdom. Many of them have not comprehended, neither will comprehend the real strategy at the Führer. Notice that, even if the Führer suggested to resist till the last drop of blood, and destroy Germany until its foundations, before permit that it fall in hands of the enemy, our most valuable human capital has been left to the disposition of the Allies. It means the great scientists. The SS could have executed them all, and notwithstanding it has protected and served them up on a silver tray to the Allies. You'll wonder why? Because all have received the order of the Führer to reveal the enemy and stimulate the construction, the secret of the most terrible weapons that the human mind can conceive. From the different countries where are sent, they will foment the competency of the sophisticated weaponry, and will develop weapons never imagined before, which will put one against another by the natural ignorance of the soldiers, and will put in danger the synarchic Universal Alliance. With the planes that are already advanced of the Third Reich, they have left over to initiate such tactic that obeys to the strategic purpose to generate some state of world tension when the universal synarchy be declared. Then, the gods will intervene. The spiritual underground currents of the end of the civilization will react before the Judaic terror, in which the synarchy will be affirmed, and the final battle will come, during which the Führer and the eternal SS will return. You understand that this simple but super-secret tactic, which constitutes an inevitable ambush, in which the Allies will fall, but how many will understand it? You'll see how many supposed Nazis, and even ex-members of the SS, will sustain that our scientists are traitors. But is that they're incapable to comprehend the strategy of the Führer, and for this reason they don't understand the actions of those who act motivated by strategic objectives. Much less to you, if they discover what you are, estimated loops. You must be prudent and tolerant with those comrades that have opted for the reality of the Führer dead. Once you will be located, you'll disconnect from them, and will never retake the contact. It will be an elemental form to prevent unnecessary risks, due to, for foes, you have already enough, and terrible with the wide fraternity, the Immortals Beret, and Bishwa, and the Druids, and Jews, who will search you to eliminate you. As I said they will wait in Italy, until they give them the Argentinian passports, and the tickets. The Spider will deposit you in banks of Buenos Aires, a sum of money that will permit each of you to settle down without problems. You must retire those funds immediately to avoid possible trackings and investigations. In regard to you, the Cid does say that you must search a location consecrated to the Virgin of Agartha, not far from your family. You can meet with your sister, but employing all the forms and coverage of the manual of the Secret Service is for the good of both of you. Think that, if the enemy discovers your sister, they can try to elicit your whereabouts by violent means, and even put pressure over you, and, if you well covered, but your sister reveals you, they can revenge on her, before the impossibility to catch you. The same precautions you shall adopt at meeting with Escadfil, who must dwells in a site far from your residence. You have forbidden any kind of commercial society, even though third persons, and intervening common activities that can relate you fortuitously. You will only reunite as comrades, to share your spiritual ideals. With respect to von Grossen, you must say goodbye to him forever in Argentina. Escadfil will be able to maintain the contact, but it is convenient that he moves away, because the old fox won't stay quiet, and will try to outbreak his private war against the Synarchy. Possibly, he will become an advisor of intelligence matters and counter-espionage, and put himself at the service of fascist regimes, of those that abound in South America. Nothing convenient for you. At last, conserve the Dox Davis, but don't utilize them, except in case of extreme necessity. The same for your initiatic faculties. Stay alert, well trained, but don't act, except in extreme case. These are, in synthesis, your orders. Wait. Survive, protect yourself, and wait. For all the gods. I screamed out of my mind. Wait for what? I can't give you more information, Tarstein responded. Impossible. Obey your orders, and you will know. he gave me a handshake, and, as if such salute was not enough, he embraced me. Farewell, Kurt von Saubermann. Go in peace, that your contribution has been invaluable for the cause of the Black Order SS. The Third Reich has rewarded you with the Iron Cross, but the Order will concede you one day a more valuable distinction that you have deservedly won. I repeat you. Soon, we will see each other during the final battle, even though we won't see us again in this life. We were at the door. I had gone out, and I was sustaining the useless motorcycle, while I heard Tatarstein saying almost the same words of the Gurkha Bangai. I would have wanted to cry of impotence before such absurd. All died, or left. Just me, mute witness of a terrible and secret reality. I had to stay in hell. And without knowing why. Heil Hitler! I screamed for every salute. Meanwhile the door of the Grugerstrasse 239 was being closed behind me forever. I started the motorcycle, and, eluding the debris, I turned around the block. Before completing the third block, someone shot me from a terrace. The bullet sectioned cleanly the fork, and the front wheel crossed suddenly. I tightened the brakes, and I flew many meters ahead. Without stop rolling, I occulted myself behind the incinerated chassis of a car, chased by a rain of bullets. I had forgotten that I was wearing the Russian uniform, and I was perambulating by a solitary street of Berlin without any protection. I released many oaths, and I ran to the corner, against the walls. I was in the Grugerstrasse again. I'd be already far from there, if I would have not proposed to take a last sight at the house of Tarstein. I advanced the meters that separated me from it, looking at both corners, alternatively. It was an obscure night but not silent. That 30th of April, I would dawn accompanied by the most tough combatants, and the noise of the bullets, howitzers and bombs was deafening. Soon, I verified gaunt that the warning of Tarstein was not vain. Indeed, the 239 not existed now in the Grugerstrasse. But the site whence I left was there. The recent marks of the tires of the motorcycle evidenced it, in the sidewalk and the street. But the door 239, in front of these marks, was not there anymore. In its place, was the closed door of a shop in a very good condition. I removed the hand from the dust layer that covered the plaque, and I read, Chandlung Hyperborea. That is to say, Hyperborean Library. I felt steps approaching to me. Perhaps the snipers that had fired me minutes before. There was nothing else to do, so I started to run in the opposite direction. I repeat to you that the time is short, Nif, so I will leave, for another opportunity, the narration of the lived adventures until arriving to Italy. I'll only mention that, on June of 1945, I met with Karl von Grossen and Escadfil, in the Franciscan monastery of the south of Italy, and I stayed there till February of 1947. On that date, our contact with the Spider presented us an officer of the Argentinian army called Zapala, who provided us passports and tickets, and, of course, new identities. I passed to be named Sereno Sanguedels, as you already know. Esca became in Domingo Pietrotesta, and Karl von Grossen, Carla di Grandi. The three of us would feign to be Italian immigrants, thence the linguistic filiation of the names. Once in this country, all happened as Tarstein predicted. They gave us the money in Buenos Aires, and each one of us went to live to a different province. Karl stayed in Buenos Aires and, as Tarstein said, he would not delay to organize a secret service, in company of other old comrade of the Gestapo, the SS Standartenführer, Justiniano von Grossmann. Escadfil chose Cordoba, and it seems that the Gotthard guided him, because years later, he found there the Order of Tyrrell Knights, which oriented his last days. And I, knowing that the signals resided in Salta, I decided that Santa Maria de la Candelaria was a good title for the Virgin of Agartha, and I acquired this property where I live since then. Once, the World War left behind, and having to gird myself to my orders, I retook the traditional familiar profession of the candies manufacturing, and I remained hidden until now, meditating of all these years on what had occurred the first half of my life. My only extensions were the sporadic visits of your parents, or of Esker, to the neutral sites accorded anticipatedly to sustain brief, very brief, meetings. And the only permanent companion that I have had, loyal by the way, have been the dogs Davis, Ying, and Yang, are the third Argentinian generation, great-grandchildren of Yoon and Yeb. And never since I settled down in Argentina, except for the failed attempt to make contact with Nimrod de Rosario, in Cordoba, acceding to the request of Esker, nobody convoked me to fulfill the final mission of the Hyperborean wisdom, until you appeared here, with the letter of Bilasena Vilcat. It doesn't ashame me to confess it. I have lost already every hope that the announcement of Konrad Tarstein be fulfilled. However, I stayed in alert, as he ordered me, and just as you unfortunately verified. Main Erheistra. That is to say, Oath of the Black Order, also wrought in the Dagger of Night. My honor is the loyalty